The morning sun barely touched the horizon when 12-year-old Marcus Chen stepped out of his grandfather's old pickup truck. The shooting range stretched before him like a foreign country, all dust and concrete and the sharp smell of gunpowder hanging in the air. His grandfather, a retired Marine with hands like weathered leather, placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You ready for this, kid?" his grandfather asked. Marcus nodded, though his stomach twisted with nerves. He had begged for months to come here, to learn what his grandfather had promised to teach him. But now, standing at the entrance of the Riverside Tactical Range, everything felt bigger and more intimidating than he had imagined. The range was already busy despite the early hour. Men in tactical gear moved with purpose between stations. The crack of gunfire echoed across the complex in irregular rhythms. Marcus noticed how everyone seemed to know exactly what they were doing, their movements confident and practiced. He felt small in his oversized jacket, carrying the worn duffel bag his grandfather had given him. Inside the main building, the atmosphere shifted. The air conditioning hit them first, a welcome relief from the desert heat already building outside. Behind the counter stood a massive man with arms covered in military tattoos. His name tag read Sergeant Mills. He looked down at Marcus with raised eyebrows. "Little young for this, isn't he, Chen?" Mills said to Marcus's grandfather. "He's ready," his grandfather replied simply. "We'll start on lane 15. Mills shrugged and pushed some paperwork across the counter. As Marcus's grandfather signed the forms, Marcus noticed a group of men in the corner. They wore matching black shirts with a logo he didn't recognize. One of them, a blond man with a square jaw, was staring at him. He nudged his companion and whispered something. Both men laughed. Marcus pretended not to notice. He had dealt with this before, being small for his age, being the quiet kid who preferred books to basketball. But here, in this place that felt so adult and serious, the laughter stung differently. His grandfather led him through a heavy door into the range itself. The sound hit Marcus like a physical thing. Even with the ear protection his grandfather handed him, the gunfire was louder than anything he had experienced. His heart pounded as they walked past occupied lanes where shooters stood in various stances, sending rounds downrange toward paper targets. Lane 15 was at the far end. His grandfather set down their bag and began unpacking with methodical care. He pulled out a small, .22 caliber rifle, the one he had promised Marcus would be his first real gun. "Before you touch this," his grandfather said, his voice serious in a way that made Marcus stand straighter, "we review the rules. Every single time. No exceptions." Marcus recited them perfectly. He had memorized them weeks ago, reading the safety manual his grandfather had given him, until the pages were dog-eared. Treat every weapon as if it's loaded. Never point it at anything you don't intend to shoot. Keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. Know your target and what's beyond it. His grandfather smiled, a rare expression that creased his weathered face. "Good. Now, let's see what you remember from our dry fire practice." For the next 20 minutes, Marcus went through the basics: stance, grip, sight alignment, breathing. His grandfather corrected small things, adjusting Marcus's elbow here, his shoulder there. Everything had to be perfect before a single round was fired. The group of men in black shirts had taken the lane next to them. Marcus tried to ignore them, but their presence was impossible to miss. They were loud, joking with each other, clearly comfortable in this environment. The blond man from earlier set up what looked like an expensive rifle, all black metal and sophisticated scopes. "Check out the kid," one of them said, not bothering to lower his voice much. "Brought his little pea shooter. Probably can't even hold it steady," another added. Marcus felt his face grow hot. His grandfather's hand touched his shoulder, steady and calm. "Ignore them," he said quietly. "Focus on your fundamentals. Nothing else matters." Marcus loaded his first round with shaking hands. The small bullet looked harmless, but he treated it with the respect his grandfather had taught him. He chambered it, the mechanical click loud, despite the ear protection. He took his stance, settled the rifle against his shoulder, and looked downrange at the target, 25 yards away. "Remember your breathing," his grandfather coached. "In, out, and in the natural pause, you squeeze." Marcus did as instructed. The rifle kicked against his shoulder, gentler than he expected. Downrange, he saw a small hole appear in the paper target, several inches left of the bullseye. "Not bad," his grandfather said. "You pulled left. Keep your trigger finger moving straight back." They worked through the fundamentals for an hour. Marcus's grouping slowly tightened, his shots moving closer to center. His grandfather was patient, never rushing, taking time to explain each adjustment. The physical mechanics were challenging, but Marcus found himself falling into a rhythm. Breathe. Aim. Squeeze. The world narrowed to just him, the rifle, and the target. The men in the next lane had finished their session and were packing up. As they passed behind Marcus, the blond man paused. "Cute," he said, looking at Marcus's target. "Maybe in a few years you'll actually hit what you're aiming at." His grandfather tensed beside him, but before he could respond, the men walked away, their laughter echoing down the corridor. "They're SEALs," his grandfather said after they left. Or were. Navy Special Operations. Some of them forget that everyone starts somewhere. Marcus looked at his target, at the cluster of holes that still seemed so far from perfect. Were they good? "They're trained to be the best," his grandfather admitted, "but being good and being decent are different things." They continued practicing. Marcus's arms began to ache, his shoulders burning from holding the rifle position. But he refused to complain. Every round taught him something new. The way the wind, even indoors, could affect his shot. The importance of follow-through, keeping his aim steady, even after pulling the trigger. The mental discipline required to shut out everything else. By the time they finished, 3 hours had passed. Marcus's target showed clear improvement, his final grouping tight enough that his grandfather nodded with approval. "You did good today," he said as they cleaned the rifle together. "Real good. You listened, you learned, and you didn't let those idiots get in your head." But they had gotten in his head. As they drove home, Marcus stared out the window at the desert landscape rolling past. He thought about the way those men had looked at him, the easy dismissal in their eyes. They had seen a kid playing at something serious, something they had mastered. That night, Marcus lay in bed researching. He looked up Navy SEAL training, their qualification standards, their reputation as elite shooters. The numbers were intimidating. They could hit targets at distances he couldn't imagine, could shoot in conditions that would stop most people. They trained constantly, pushing their skills to levels that seemed superhuman. But his grandfather had been a Marine. He had taught marksmanship to recruits, had competed in military shooting competitions, and he believed Marcus could learn. Marcus made a decision that night. He would practice, he would learn, and one day, maybe, he would be good enough that no one would laugh. The next weekend, they returned to the range. And the weekend after that, his grandfather was retired and had time to dedicate to teaching. Marcus was young and had the gift of a mind that soaked up information like desert sand soaking up rare rain. They started with fundamentals, but his grandfather began adding complexity. Different distances, different positions, shooting while standing, kneeling, prone. Marcus learned to adjust for variables, to read the subtle ways his body and the rifle interacted. His grandfather taught him breathing techniques used by competitive shooters, ways to control his heart rate, to find stillness in his center even as adrenaline pumped through his veins. The men in black shirts became regulars too. They showed up most weekends, always professional in their shooting, always dismissive when they noticed Marcus. The blond man, whose name Marcus learned was Derek, seemed to find particular amusement in watching him practice. "Still at it?" Derek asked one morning, pausing as he walked past their lane. "How many targets you planning to miss today, kid?" Marcus didn't respond. His grandfather had taught him that too. Words could be ignored, but results spoke clearly. Over the months, something began to shift. Marcus's body adapted to the rifle's weight. His muscles developed the specific strength needed for steady holds. His eyes learned to find targets quickly, to acquire and track with increasing speed. But more than the physical changes, his mind transformed. Shooting, he discovered, was mostly mental. It was about controlling the noise, both external and internal. It was about patience and discipline and the ability to repeat the same perfect motion hundreds of times. His grandfather introduced him to competitive shooting concepts, timed drills where speed mattered as much as accuracy, scenarios where he had to transition between multiple targets, Shooting from awkward positions or after physical exertion, each challenge was another lesson, another piece of the puzzle. Marcus also learned the history. His grandfather told him about Marine Corps marksmanship traditions, about legendary shooters who had become folklore. He explained the difference between combat shooting and competition shooting, between practical accuracy and precision shooting. He taught Marcus that guns were tools, nothing more, nothing less. Respect them, master them, but never fear them. By the time Marcus turned 13, he could outshoot most casual range visitors. His groupings at 25 yards were tight enough to cover with a quarter. He had moved beyond the 22, practicing now with larger calibers, learning to manage recoil, to maintain accuracy despite increased power. The range staff noticed. Sergeant Mills, who had initially seemed skeptical, began watching Marcus's practice sessions with interest. Other regulars, serious shooters who came to maintain their skills, would pause to observe. Word spread quietly that Chen's grandson could shoot. Marcus overheard conversations, people comparing him to their own children, wondering at his focus, his consistency. It was flattering but also intimidating. The attention meant expectations, and expectations meant pressure. Derek and his friends noticed too. Their teasing became less frequent, replaced by something closer to irritation. They were men who prided themselves on their skills, who had undergone some of the world's most rigorous training. Having a kid, barely a teenager, shooting respectably near them seemed to offend them on some level. Beginner's luck, one of them muttered after watching Marcus complete a particularly good drill. His grandfather overheard. Luck is what people call it when they don't see the work, he said calmly, not looking up from the rifle he was cleaning. The tension simmered under the surface. Marcus tried not to care, tried to focus only on his own improvement, but he was 13, and at 13, proving yourself matters more than wisdom suggests it should. Then came the day that changed everything. Marcus and his grandfather arrived to find the range buzzing with unusual energy. A competition was being announced, Sergeant Mills explained. Local shooting competition, open to all skill levels, to be held in 3 months. Various categories, various challenges. A real test of marksmanship. You should enter, Mills said to Marcus, surprising him. He's just a kid, Derek said. He had been standing nearby, listening. This is for serious shooters. Mills looked at Derek with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. Age limit is 12 and up. If he qualifies in the preliminary rounds, he competes. Derek smiled, but it wasn't friendly. Sure, let the kid embarrass himself. Might teach him that some things are for grown-ups. Marcus looked at his grandfather, who was studying him carefully. Your choice, his grandfather said. No pressure either way. But there was pressure. Marcus felt it in the weight of Derek's smug smile, in the challenge hanging in the air. He thought about all the hours he had practiced, all the patient corrections his grandfather had offered, all the times he had been dismissed as just a kid. I want to try, Marcus said. The preliminary qualifying rounds were held on a Saturday that Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. He barely slept the night before, running through mental rehearsals, visualizing each stage of the competition as his grandfather had taught him. When dawn came, he was already awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to calm the butterflies in his stomach. His grandfather drove them to the range in comfortable silence. He had learned that Marcus needed quiet before big moments, space to gather his thoughts and center himself. Only as they pulled into the parking lot did he speak. Remember what this is really about, he said. This isn't about beating anyone else. It's about showing yourself what you're capable of. Everything else is just noise. The range had been transformed. Additional lanes were set up, each marked with numbered flags. Registration tables were surrounded by competitors of all ages and backgrounds. Marcus saw men and women in professional shooting gear, their equipment expensive and well-maintained. He saw older teenagers who looked confident and experienced, and scattered among them were a few younger kids like himself, though not many. Derek and his crew were there, of course. They had registered as a team, wearing matching shirts with their unit insignia. When Derek saw Marcus checking in, his eyebrows rose. Well, he said, walking over. The kid actually showed up. Got your training wheels on that rifle? Marcus ignored him, focusing on the paperwork in front of him. His grandfather had taught him that engagement was a choice, and some people didn't deserve it. "Good luck, kid," Derek added, his tone making it clear he meant the opposite. "Try not to shoot yourself in the foot." The preliminary round was straightforward. 50 rounds at 50 yards, scored for accuracy. Top 50% would advance. Marcus drew lane 23, unfortunately close to where Derek's team had set up. As he prepared his rifle, Marcus felt the weight of attention. Other competitors were watching the youngest participants, curious to see how they would handle the pressure. Families had gathered in the observation area, creating an audience that made the whole thing feel more real, more serious. The range officer called for shooters to take their positions. Marcus settled into his lane, checking and rechecking his equipment. His rifle, a .223 caliber that his grandfather had helped him choose, felt familiar in his hands. He had fired thousands of rounds through it, knew its quirks and characteristics, like they were part of his own body. "Ready on the left, ready on the right," the range officer's voice boomed through the speakers. "All ready on the firing line." The buzzer sounded. Marcus took his first shot, barely hearing it through his focus. He was in what his grandfather called the zone, that mental space where everything else faded away. Breathe, aim, squeeze. The rhythm was meditative, each shot building on the last. Around him, other shooters worked through their rounds. He heard the different reports of various rifles, felt the subtle vibrations through the concrete, but none of it penetrated his concentration. There was only the target, the crosshairs, the gentle pressure of the trigger. 50 rounds went by faster than he expected. When the buzzer sounded for ceasefire, Marcus almost felt surprised. He set down his rifle, suddenly aware of the ache in his shoulders, the tension he had been carrying without noticing. "Clear and safe," the range officer called. "Step back from the firing line." Targets were collected and taken for scoring. Marcus waited with the other competitors, watching the range officer's work. His grandfather stood nearby, not offering reassurance or predictions, just being present. The scores were posted 30 minutes later. Marcus scanned the list, looking for his number. When he found it, his breath caught. He had scored a 92 out of a possible 100. Not perfect, but solid. More importantly, it placed him in the top 20 of all competitors. "Not bad, Chen," Sergeant Mills said, walking past. "That's a respectable score." Marcus allowed himself a small smile. He had advanced. The real competition was still ahead, but he had proven he belonged here. Derek had scored a 96. When he saw Marcus's score, he snorted. 92. Cute. Must be nice competing against all the weekend warriors instead of actual professionals. His teammate, a shorter man named Rodriguez, seemed less impressed by the bravado. 92 at 13 years old is pretty damn good, he said quietly. "Better than I shot at that age." Derek shot him a look, but said nothing more. The main competition was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Marcus spent every available moment practicing. His grandfather helped him refine his technique, working on the small details that separated good shooters from great ones. Trigger control became even more precise. His breathing patterns were adjusted for maximum stability. They practiced different scenarios, different positions, different stress conditions. "The competition will have multiple stages," his grandfather explained. "Speed rounds, accuracy rounds, practical scenarios. You need to be comfortable with all of them." They trained for speed without sacrificing accuracy, learning to transition smoothly between targets. Marcus practiced shooting from standing, kneeling, and prone positions until he could switch between them without thinking. His grandfather timed him, pushed him, demanded more even when Marcus thought he had nothing left to give. School became secondary. Marcus's teachers noticed his distraction, but his grades had always been good enough to afford some slack. His few friends couldn't understand his obsession with shooting. They invited him to movies, to gaming sessions, to normal teenage activities. Marcus declined almost everything. He had a goal now, a purpose that burned with an intensity that surprised even him. It wasn't just about proving Derek wrong anymore, though that remained a factor. It was about testing himself, about seeing how far dedication and practice could take someone. His grandfather had given him a gift, the knowledge that excellence was possible, that age didn't determine capability, that skill was built through repetition and refinement. The night before the competition, his grandfather sat him down for a serious talk. "Tomorrow people will have expectations," he said. "Some will want you to succeed, others will want you to fail. The only opinion that matters is your own." "What if I mess up?" Marcus asked, voicing the fear that had been building. His grandfather smiled. "Then you mess up. You're 13. You're supposed to mess up. But I'll tell you something important. You've already succeeded. You committed to learning something difficult. You put in the work. You didn't quit when people doubted you. Everything else is just details." Competition day arrived with clear skies and comfortable temperatures. The range was packed with spectators, competitors, and officials. Local press had shown up, intrigued by the human interest angle of such a young competitor. Marcus tried to ignore the cameras, focusing instead on his preparation routine. The competition format was revealed. 3 stages, each testing different skills. Stage 1 was precision shooting at 100 yards. Stage 2 was timed shooting at multiple targets from various distances. Stage 3 was a practical scenario, simulating real-world conditions with moving targets and obstacles. Marcus drew his starting position for Stage 1. He would shoot in the 3rd group, giving him time to observe others, but also time to get nervous. He watched the first groups, noting their techniques, their results. Scores were high across the board. These were skilled shooters, people who took the craft seriously. Derek shot in the 2nd group. His performance was impressive, smooth and controlled. He placed 3 rounds within a 2-inch circle at 100 yards, a display of skill that drew appreciative murmurs from the crowd. When he finished, he made a point of looking over at Marcus, his expression saying everything words couldn't. Then it was Marcus's turn. He approached the firing line, feeling the weight of every eye. The young kid who thought he could compete. The novelty act. He heard whispers, some encouraging, some skeptical. His grandfather's words echoed, "The only opinion that matters is your own." He took his position. The rifle settled against his shoulder like it belonged there. The target at 100 yards looked small. The bullseye even smaller. But Marcus had practiced at this distance countless times. He knew the holdover needed, the wind correction, the subtle adjustments for temperature and humidity. The buzzer sounded. Marcus fired his first round. Even before checking the spotting scope, he knew it was good. The rifle had felt right, the break clean. He worked through his 5 shots methodically, not rushing, letting each one be its own perfect repetition. When he finished and checked the target through the scope, his heart leaped. 5 rounds in a group smaller than 3 inches, 4 of them touching. It was the best shooting of his life. The crowd reacted, not with wild cheering, but with the kind of respectful appreciation that serious shooters give to exceptional performance. Marcus had just outshot most of the field, including several competitors with decades more experience. Sergeant Mills approached as Marcus cleared his rifle. "Where the hell did that come from?" he asked, not unkindly. "Practice," Marcus said simply. Derek's face had gone stony. His friends around him were quiet, the easy banter from earlier replaced by something more serious. They had just watched a 13-year-old shoot lights out, and it had clearly shaken their assumptions. Stage 2 was where things got interesting. Timed shooting required not just accuracy, but speed and transition skills. Competitors had to engage multiple targets at varying distances, each within a strict time limit. Points were deducted for misses and for exceeding time. This was where Derek's SEAL training showed. His movements were economical and practiced, the result of countless hours of tactical shooting drills. He transitioned between targets smoothly, his reload quick and efficient. His score reflected his experience. High marks for both speed and accuracy. When Marcus's turn came, he felt the difference immediately. This wasn't the calm, controlled pace of precision shooting. This was dynamic, demanding quick decisions and faster execution. The buzzer started, and he moved. His first target engagement was clean, 2 rounds center mass. Transition to target 2, adjust for distance, fire. Target 3 required a position change, dropping to kneeling for a low obstacle. Marcus did it without thinking, muscle memory taking over. Reload, target 4 and 5 in rapid succession. The final buzzer caught him just as he fired his last round. He had made time, barely. But had he maintained accuracy, the targets were scored. Marcus had hit every target, though not all in the optimal zones. His score placed him in the top 10 for the stage, respectable but not dominant. Derek had scored higher, as had several other experienced shooters. "You're fast," Rodriguez told him during the break between stages. "Faster than I expected, but you're sacrificing too much accuracy for speed." It was good advice, delivered without condescension. Marcus nodded, grateful. The final stage was the most complex. Practical shooting scenarios designed to simulate real-world conditions. Targets would appear at random intervals. Some would be friend, others foe, requiring split-second identification. Distance would vary wildly, and it would all happen while navigating a course of obstacles and barriers. This was Derek's element. His SEAL training had prepared him for exactly this kind of dynamic, high-pressure shooting. As Marcus watched him move through the course, he saw the difference experience made. Derek's movements were confident, his target discrimination instant, his shooting smooth even while on the move. When Derek finished with the top score of the day, he couldn't resist. "That's how it's done, kid," he called to Marcus. "Maybe pay attention and you'll learn something." Marcus was scheduled to shoot last in his group. He used the time to visualize the course, planning his movements, anticipating where targets might appear. His grandfather watched him, saying nothing, letting Marcus work through his mental preparation. Finally, it was his turn. Marcus stepped to the starting line, feeling his heart rate elevate. This was it, the culmination of months of training, of determination, of refusing to be dismissed. The starting buzzer pierced the air, and Marcus moved. His first steps felt awkward, too conscious of the watching crowd, of the cameras, of Derek's smirk. But then training took over, and the world narrowed to just the course ahead. The first target appeared from behind a barrier, a cardboard silhouette with a weapon drawn. Threat. Marcus engaged, 2 rounds, then moved forward. A second target emerged, this one showing empty hands. No threat. Marcus held fire, continuing his advance. The discipline to not shoot was as important as the shooting itself. Obstacles forced him to adjust his movement. He climbed over a low wall, maintaining weapon control, staying balanced. Another target, partially obscured by cover. Marcus took the shot, compensating for the limited target area. The cardboard flipped, indicating a hit. The course twisted through a series of barriers designed to disorient. Marcus kept his head, navigating by memory and instinct. Targets appeared at varying distances, some close enough to touch, others barely visible at the far end of his sight line. Each required a different response, a different level of precision. His breathing was controlled despite the physical exertion. His grandfather had trained him for this, had made him run before shooting sessions, had pushed him to maintain accuracy even when his heart was pounding. That preparation paid off now. His hands stayed steady, his aim true. The final section of the course presented the greatest challenge. 3 targets appearing simultaneously at different distances. Marcus had to prioritize, engaging the closest threat first, then working outward. His transitions were smooth. Economy of movement learned through endless repetition. The final buzzer sounded. Marcus safed his weapon, stepping back from the course. His body was shaking slightly from adrenaline, his breathing elevated but not ragged. He had no idea how well he had done, but he had finished, had navigated every challenge. The wait for scores felt eternal. Marcus watched as officials reviewed the target recordings, marking hits and misses, calculating times and accuracy percentages. Other competitors gathered around, some checking their own performances, others simply curious about the overall standings. When the scores finally posted, the range went quiet. Marcus found his name on the list, traced across to his score, and felt his stomach flip. He had placed second overall in the final stage. Second, behind Derek by only 3 points. But more importantly, when combined with his scores from the previous stages, his overall placement was third in the entire competition. Third place, out of more than 60 competitors, many with military backgrounds, decades of experience, and sophisticated equipment. Marcus Chen, 13 years old, had placed third. The range exploded with reaction. Some competitors rushed to congratulate him, their respect genuine and immediate. Spectators who had followed his performance throughout the day cheered. The local press swarmed, cameras and microphones appearing as if from nowhere. But Marcus barely noticed. He was looking at Derek, whose face had gone from smug satisfaction to something much harder to read. Disbelief, maybe. Or anger. Derek's teammates were congratulating him on his first-place finish, but his attention was fixed on Marcus. Sergeant Mills made his way through the crowd to Marcus. "That was something special, kid," he said. "In 20 years running this range, I've never seen shooting like that from someone your age." The awards ceremony was held immediately after. Derek received his first-place trophy, a substantial piece of crystal that caught the afternoon light. He accepted it with a practice speech about training, dedication, and the honor of competition. When he finished, his eyes found Marcus in the crowd, challenging. Second place went to a retired Army Ranger named Patterson, a man in his 50s who had been shooting competitively for decades. He accepted his award graciously, making a point of acknowledging the high level of competition. Then it was Marcus's turn. As he walked to the front, he heard the applause, felt the weight of attention. The trophy was smaller than Derek's but felt heavy in his hands. A microphone was thrust toward him, and suddenly he was expected to say something. "I just want to thank my grandfather," Marcus said, his voice cracking slightly. "He taught me everything, and he taught me that being good at something isn't about natural talent. It's about showing up every day and putting in the work." The applause that followed was loud and sustained. Marcus returned to where his grandfather stood, and for the first time since the competition began, he let himself smile. His grandfather pulled him into a brief hug, uncharacteristic public emotion from a man who usually kept his feelings carefully controlled. "Proud of you," his grandfather said quietly. "Not for the trophy, for how you handled yourself." Derek approached as the crowd began to disperse. His friends hung back, giving him space. He looked at Marcus for a long moment, his expression still unreadable. "You got lucky today," Derek said finally. Before Marcus could respond, Rodriguez stepped forward. "Come on, man," he said to Derek. "The kid earned it. You saw him shoot." Derek's jaw tightened. "He's 13. What's he going to do, turn professional?" "This was a fluke." "Was it?" Rodriguez asked. "Because from where I stood, he looked pretty consistent. And those fundamentals? Those were solid. Better than some guys I served with." The tension between the two men was palpable. Derek looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Rodriguez's expression stopped him. Instead, he turned back to Marcus. "Enjoy your moment, kid," he said, "but don't think this means anything. Real shooting isn't done on safe ranges with nice targets. It's done when everything is on the line." He walked away before Marcus could respond, his teammates following. Most looked uncomfortable with Derek's behavior, but loyalty kept them quiet. "Don't let him get to you," Rodriguez said, remaining behind. "Derek's pride is hurt. He's been top dog here for 2 years. Having a kid push him was good for him, even if he can't see it yet." He extended his hand. "That was damn fine shooting. Keep it up." Marcus shook his hand, grateful for the kindness. The local newspaper ran a story the next week. Local teen places third in shooting competition, outperforms military veterans. The article featured a photo of Marcus holding his trophy, his grandfather standing proudly beside him. It detailed his training, his dedication, and his surprising performance against much more experienced competitors. The article spread beyond the local paper. Regional news picked it up. Then, a few national blogs focused on shooting sports. Marcus Chen became a minor curiosity in competitive shooting circles, the 13-year-old who could hang with the pros. With attention came opportunity. A competitive shooting coach from 2 states over reached out, offering to work with Marcus if he was interested in pursuing shooting seriously. A local sports equipment company offered to sponsor him, providing gear and ammunition in exchange for representing their brand. Invitations arrived to other competitions, some local, others requiring travel. Marcus's life shifted. What had begun as time with his grandfather had evolved into something bigger. His school adjusted his schedule to accommodate training. His classmates, who had barely known him before, suddenly wanted to be friends with the kid who was getting written about in newspapers. But success brought complications too. Derek's animosity didn't fade. If anything, the attention Marcus received seemed to deepen it. At the range, Derek went out of his way to be dismissive, to undercut Marcus's accomplishments. His friends, to their credit, mostly ignored his behavior. Rodriguez, in particular, became something of a mentor, offering advice and encouragement. Derek's dealing with something, Rodriguez explained one afternoon. He's struggling with the transition from military to civilian life. Being the best shooter here was part of his identity. You threatening that has nothing to do with you personally. Marcus tried to understand, but it was hard. He had never asked for conflict, had simply wanted to learn and improve. Derek's hostility felt unfair. 3 months after the competition, another event was announced. This one was bigger, a regional championship that would draw competitors from multiple states. The winner would receive a significant prize and, more importantly, recognition in the serious shooting community. Marcus registered without hesitation. So did Derek. The training intensified. Marcus's new coach, a man named Thompson who had competed internationally, pushed him harder than his grandfather ever had. The fundamentals his grandfather had instilled were refined further. Thompson introduced advanced concepts, reading mirage to judge wind, using different breathing techniques for different scenarios, psychological strategies for maintaining focus under pressure. "You're good," Thompson told him after a particularly challenging session. "But good isn't enough at this level. Everyone there will be good. You need to be exceptional. And exceptional means perfect execution when everything is on the line." Marcus trained 6 days a week. His schoolwork suffered slightly, but his grades remained passable. His social life disappeared almost entirely. Friends stopped inviting him places, accepting that he was unavailable. Even his grandfather saw less of him, as Thompson's training schedule consumed most of Marcus's free time. But Marcus didn't mind. He had found something he was genuinely passionate about, something that challenged him mentally and physically. The rifle had become an extension of himself. The range was where he felt most comfortable, most capable. Derek was training too. Marcus would see him at the range, working through drills with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Their interactions were minimal, limited to curt nods. The easy mockery from before was gone, replaced by something colder and more focused. The regional championship was held in Arizona, requiring travel. Marcus's grandfather accompanied him, as did Thompson. The competition would span 2 days, with multiple stages testing every aspect of marksmanship. More than 200 competitors had registered, including several semi-professionals who made their living through competition shooting. The first day was grueling. Stage after stage tested different skills, each demanding peak performance. Marcus shot well, consistently placing in the top 10 for each stage. But he wasn't leading. That position belonged to a competitor from Colorado, a man in his 30s who shot with machine-like precision. Derek was also performing well, hovering in the top 5. Marcus noticed that Derek's shooting had improved since their last competition. The motivation apparently cut both ways. By the end of the first day, Marcus was exhausted. The mental strain of maintaining focus for hours had drained him more than the physical demands. In his hotel room, he reviewed the day's performance with Thompson, analyzing what had gone right and what needed adjustment. "You're shooting scared," Thompson observed. "You're good enough to be here, but you're still treating everyone else like they're better than you. They're not. You've proven that. Tomorrow, you need to shoot like you believe it." Marcus nodded, but doubt gnawed at him. These were the best shooters in the region. Many were older, more experienced, more naturally talented. What right did he have to think he could beat them? His grandfather must have sensed his thoughts. After Thompson left, he sat down beside Marcus. "You remember why you started shooting?" he asked. Marcus thought back to that first day at the range, to the mockery, to feeling small and dismissed. "I wanted to prove I could do it," he said. "Wrong," his grandfather said. "That's why you kept shooting. But you started because I asked if you wanted to learn something difficult, and you said yes, not to prove anything to anyone, just to learn." He let that sit for a moment before continuing. "Tomorrow, forget about proving anything. Forget about Derek, forget about the rankings, forget about what anyone thinks. Just shoot like we're back on lane 15, working through fundamentals. Everything else is noise." The second day began with a surprise. A new stage had been added, one not announced beforehand. long-range precision shooting at 300 yards. Most competitors had not practiced at this distance, giving everyone an equal disadvantage. Marcus had practiced at 300 yards. Thompson had insisted on it, pushing his capabilities beyond what the competition might require. As they set up for the stage, Marcus felt something shift inside him. This was his opportunity. The stage was shot individually, giving each competitor their best chance without the pressure of simultaneous shooting. Marcus drew a position late in the order, giving him time to observe others and adjust his strategy. Derek shot before him. His performance was solid but not exceptional. 300 yards was beyond his normal training distance, and it showed. He scored well enough to remain competitive but didn't dominate. Then it was Marcus's turn. As he settled into position, the doubt that had plagued him yesterday was gone. This was just shooting. Just him, the rifle, and a target. Everything his grandfather and Thompson had taught him came together. The wind was tricky, gusting unpredictably. Marcus took his time, reading the mirage, feeling the air against his skin. He made his wind call and took his first shot. The spotter called it good, center mass. He repeated the process 4 more times, adjusting slightly for changing conditions. When he finished, he knew it was his best performance yet. The targets confirmed it. 5 rounds in a group that could be covered by a softball at 300 yards. The range officer announced his score, and the crowd reacted with genuine amazement. Marcus had just shot a perfect round at a distance that had challenged everyone else. The remaining stages blurred together. Marcus shot in a state of flow, where conscious thought disappeared and pure skill took over. His transitions were smooth, his accuracy consistent, his mental game unshakable. By the time the final stage concluded, he had moved up in the rankings significantly. The overall results took hours to calculate. Competitors gathered in the main building, drinking coffee and swapping stories, while officials worked through the complex scoring. Marcus sat with his grandfather, trying not to think about placements or rankings. He had shot well. That would have to be enough. When the results were finally posted, the room fell silent. People crowded around the board, scanning for their names and positions. Marcus was too nervous to look immediately. He watched other people's reactions instead, trying to gauge the results from their expressions. Marcus. His grandfather's voice was quiet but carried something Marcus had never heard before. Maybe. You need to see this. Marcus pushed through the crowd to the results board. His eyes found his name, then traced across to his final placement. 2nd place overall. Out of more than 200 competitors from across multiple states, Marcus Chen had placed 2nd. The winner was the machine-like shooter from Colorado, a man who had been competing professionally for nearly a decade. But Marcus had beaten everyone else, including Derek, who had placed 5th. The room erupted with congratulations. Competitors who had initially seemed skeptical or dismissive now approached with genuine respect. The shooting community, Marcus was learning, valued skill above all else. Age, background, experience mattered less than what you could do when it counted. Thompson was grinning, an expression Marcus had rarely seen. That long-range stage, he said, that was championship-level shooting. You know that, right? That was the kind of performance that wins national competitions. The award ceremony felt surreal. Standing on the platform, accepting the 2nd-place trophy, Marcus looked out at the crowd and saw his grandfather. The old Marine had tears in his eyes, though he would probably deny it later. That moment, seeing his grandfather's pride, meant more than any trophy ever could. The professional winner gave a gracious speech, then surprised everyone by calling Marcus up beside him. "This young man," he said to the crowd, "shot better than I did when I was twice his age. Keep an eye on him. If he keeps training like this, he's going to be beating all of us in a few years." The applause was thunderous. Marcus felt his face burn with embarrassment and pride in equal measure. Derek left before the ceremony concluded. Marcus saw him through the window, loading his gear into his truck, his movements sharp and angry. Part of Marcus felt bad for him, but a larger part felt vindicated. All the mockery, all the dismissal, all the times Derek had made him feel small suddenly felt like fuel that had driven him to this moment. The drive home was long but comfortable. His grandfather drove while Marcus dozed in the passenger seat, exhausted but content. When they finally pulled into the driveway, Marcus's trophy secured carefully in the back, his grandfather spoke. You know what impresses me most? He asked. It's not the shooting, though that's damn impressive. It's that you never let the negativity change who you are. Derek tried to make you feel small, and instead of getting angry or bitter, you just worked harder. That's character. Marcus thought about that. I was angry sometimes, he admitted. When he would make fun of me, I wanted to prove him wrong. Nothing wrong with that, his grandfather said. Using negativity as motivation is smart. But you didn't let it consume you. You didn't become mean or arrogant.